All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and welcome our next set of speakers on board. I would like to go ahead and welcome Dr. Steffen, Sommer, and Samuel Spencer. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Steffen has been the principal of the Doha College since September 2015. He is currently the vice chair of the Council of British International Schools. Steffen has a PhD in translation studies and speaks 6 languages, and along with which we have Samuel Spencer as well. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the teacher of design and technology, the head of house at Doha College, a highly driven technology teacher who is passionate about the impact that technology has on the field of education. Let's go ahead and welcome them on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for this wonderful welcome. It is a real privilege to speak here at this conference. And apart from this very flattering introduction, let me just add a few more things. Doha College has been here in Qatar as a British international school for 40 years. And as far as the IT and the use of technology is concerned, we have been a protagonist of many new schemes. We were one of the first schools in the Middle East to introduce one-to-one devices in 2000, as far back as 2012. All our students have iPads, which are initially, when they were introduced, of course, it was part of a scheme to get our students into that learning space. That learning can take place not only in the classroom, but anywhere in the school, or indeed anywhere at home. From day one of the scheme in 2012, they were able to take these iPads, which came with their place in the school. They could take that on holiday, they could take it home and use it as a learning tool, as an extension of memory and an expansion of their skills and a trainer of skills everywhere they went. Of course, we review our digital strategy on a daily basis, and Sam, who will be presenting in a few seconds, Sam Spencer, runs our IT strategy committee. And it really means, and that's why our title is a digital strategy for the 3rd decade of the 21st century. We are now, of course, well into this 3rd decade, and the needs of our students, the further expansion of their learning, the further integration of IT as an integral tool while they're going about their daily learning will become a priority for all of us. Now, of course, particularly since the vast amount of learning that we've all had to undertake during the pandemic. Luckily, as I said, we have been very proactive in the IT field at our college for some time. So the pandemic, although it was a surprise to us as it was to everybody else, our students and staff were already well trained and well set up for using our digital learning environment, for using the individual devices, and also for teaching online lessons. This was not as new as it might have been to many others, thanks to the work of the IT strategy committee at Doha College over years. So on this note, I'll hand to Sam for the details of a digital strategy for the 3rd decade of the 21st century. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So obviously, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know we've got a lot going on today, so thank you for taking the time to join us and to go through our presentation. So just a short bio about myself, a short introduction. My name is obviously Samuel Spencer. I do have a background in kind of technology, being a design technology teacher. I always look at kind of that innovation within that class, within the classroom, and how technology plays such a role within the role of the student and their lives after school. So I started off within kind of the marketing and management business aspect in my undergraduate, but then recently I've just graduated from UCL, University College London, in a master's in education and technology. So looking at how we can really push that innovation forward. During my time there, my dissertation title really focused on professional development and how we can actually improve teacher proficiency in teachers proficiency in online-based learning during a time of COVID-19. So very relevant to our own time here. I do have industry experience, having short projects within both Credit Suisse and Google, looking at kind of that reflection of that onboarding process with Google, and also looking at branding and communications IT within Credit Suisse. So I try and blend both my teaching experience and my industry experience in what I do. So obviously, as we have had seen a lot of changes within the time of the lockdown and the pandemic, we have seen a huge growth within the EdTech market specifically. And using the figures from the UK, we've seen a drastic increase in the amount that we're offered as a school. So as you can see from the figures, we have seen a 72% increase in growth from the EdTech industry. It's now worth 3.5 billion and increasing. So with this substantial growth, we've seen a huge amount of competition within the market. And now we're offering so many diverse ranges of different software, different technology that can be embedded in our classrooms. So there's a huge kind of availability online now. So the future, we can only see more growth within this within the market. And obviously, during the time of the pandemic, there's uncertain times still ahead of us, and more opportunities and challenges have arisen during this time. So we can see that there's more potential opportunity of more software development and more technology being released in the future. And this is exciting times, but also quite daunting times for those educators among us. So with this increase, we can see that there could potentially be a vast amount of investment into certain outreaches. And based on Hollow and IQ, they've actually predicted these following growths. So in AV and virtual reality, in artificial intelligence, robotics, and blockchain, you can see that there's significant impacts on the classroom through these investments. And having this going to be an exciting time, these advanced technologies could also see an involvement of new curriculum within our schools. So not just focusing on kind of being taught within computer science or traditional IT or designing technology, but we might even see larger subjects being created within our education systems. With that being said, obviously we've got those augmented reality being embedded within our classrooms, and we can see. I've used these within the workshop, and I've found it extremely helpful to get the students to visualize the workshop from a different level, but also from a virtual one now as well, especially not having as much access as what they would normally have had previously. We've got robotics that are playing obviously a huge role, and more kits becoming more available for students to purchase themselves, not just from kind of educational institutions having to make that investment, but students are having the opportunity to invest in these themselves in the home environment as well, so that it's become cheaper and more accessible. And then obviously that virtual reality, seeing more generations of that virtual reality equipment being evolved and being developed within schooling structures, offering a range from kind of different price ranges as well, allowing you to be able to access from a home environment, which is very exciting times. What we have seen is obviously a lot of these being embedded within industry and for training from in higher education. And we're actually starting to see more of this being fed down into our secondary education and also our primary sectors as well. Virtual reality has been used within kind of exposure therapy to actually as a treatment for PTSD and anxiety. We've seen the use of these virtual reality in simulators, such as flight simulators for aviation, and then also from that in the medical industry, where we used to rely on kind of the study of real life kind of experiences in the operating theatre, and now we can very much be a part of that within a virtual reality. So we can actually start seeing that learning happening within a virtual environment. And I'm excited at seeing the opportunities that this has, especially moving forward within the secondary environment, looking at A-level students, GCSE students, potentially even Key Stage 3, being able to embed this and have these experiences within school as well. But what is very important is, as a teaching body and as educators, that we start thinking about how technology can play a role in our professional development in the future. And instead of having this kind of very fixed mindset of kind of planning, but to be able to think about, kind of think on our feet. And as this technology is released, we can then embed it as soon as possible into our lessons. And it's quite interesting to see how teachers have reacted within the time of the pandemic, where suddenly we are being placed out of our comfort zones into these environments and having to learn on the job very quickly. And that's part of what education is now, making sure that we have that vision. I know Richard in the opening keynote was talking about how that vision and how that our adaptation to change is very, very important. And I think that's very, very worth considering to move forward with. So we work in iterations within design technology, and we start thinking about how this reflective cycle as our teaching practice kind of evolves, and how often we might have to do those iterations. So what we might see is this iteration cycle shortening in terms of time and allowing us to constantly reflect on a weekly, possibly daily basis, with a lot of this technology being evolved. And with these opportunities, we could also start thinking about how digital leadership plays a role within our futures, and especially from institutional levels. We've seen a huge, vast amount of growth within the EdTech sector, where we've actually seen 56% growth in possible positions in EdTech. So with that, it allows us to be able to have more offerings to our educators. But that also means that we have to, as a school or as institutions and educational institutions, we have to be in a position in which we can actually decipher all of this digital learning that's going on around us and all these opportunities, and to try and figure out what is best for our own case and for our own environment. And that needs to happen with regards to qualified people. And so we might actually see, kind of the rearrangement of staffing maps, and what traditionally was the case in existing educational institutions might actually see a whole new branch of that digital leadership being developed in schools. We need to think about how policy is going to be continuously changed, and how those iterations are going to continue in the future as this technology is then developed as well. Again, we might also think about our development priorities in the future and how we can think about these innovative solutions, working with companies to then identify all of the gaps that we possibly had within this this pandemic, and be able to kind of communicate that with companies to be able to improve our experiences as educators. So these are just some examples of the use of digital leadership, and how digital leaders have kind of embedded itself within existing leaders. So there was a really nice example of a principal using TikTok, a new social media app, to be able to communicate to primary students and be able to communicate that quite effectively. We had the use of virtual reality to improve student engagement, and also to start exploring digital well-being, which is going to be a huge part of research, especially for the future. And then now more publication and more research is being released to better support our leadership groups to evolve and to be able to develop themselves and to be able to guide us in the future of digital learning. And with that, we do also need to think about our digital well-being, and having predicted or looked towards the future and predicting that there's 2 billion more learners, okay, between now and 2050, we need to start thinking about and start to reflect on our time with this digital learning. We have the digital divide, of which a lot of people did not necessarily have access to the information that was being provided to them by their educators. And this time during the pandemic might have seen that divide being narrowed, but ultimately that is still a role within society at the minute. So what does digital learning look like in the future for these learners? And we need to also think about, with regards to this, this digital well-being, how do we better support them in their learning, but also protect them? The government, or the UK government, have actually allowed or kind of updated more support for schools and for educators, especially from a teaching level as well. So there's a lot of information out there to be able to help support us in that safeguarding and that well-being. So for those educators among us who would like to have kind of some sort of direction to start, this resource would be very helpful for you. And then moving on and moving forward, how do we promote development and how do we embrace that change? And what's exciting during this time of the kind of pandemic and what this is kind of opened is this this whole free professional development, online courses, and how we can actually access that as educators. Many of us had to learn on the job very quickly. So we actually found ourselves learning about all these different systems. And what is very important here is that we do not necessarily need to have financial investment to be able to develop. So what I quite like is this quote: technology would never replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. And this just opens up the realm of still placing that teacher as a center of what we're doing and as a facilitator of learning within the classroom. And is about their professional development and learning from the students within their environment to be able to adapt their learning outcomes and the lessons to actually address those outcomes and objectives. So we could see a whole new generation of learning that goes on in the school, learning from our students, but also with those students coming into the teaching profession. We might also see a shift in learning from this new generation of staff that's coming through. They've been exposed to new technologies in university level that allows us to transform our teaching even further and even more for the future. With regards to my own development, I thought I would help you to help guide some people who might be interested in this area. And I personally have seen Future Learn as a very good resource for this, allowing not only me to network with other people who are passionate about these subjects, but also to be able to be provided with free professional development and ongoing as well. So if you need a starting point, this would be very helpful if you wanted to look outside of what is being provided by your educational institutions. Okay, and thank you very much. If there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer. That's fine. Okay. Okay, we've got quite a long one here, Stefan. So throughout history, after a global crisis, a new era of thinking begins. COVID has definitely increased the pace and accessibility of digitalization in education. Should we be concerned that as the world becomes more diversified, decentralized, and dependent on technology, this would lead to a high risk of unmanageable failures and either the physical or social systems that underpin survival? Sorry, Stefan, you are muted.
Yes, if I could just say something at the beginning, and Sam, do please chip in afterwards. Well, I think what the pandemic has brought, it has moved the entire educational space, everything we do in schools and in other educational establishments. It's moved us in earnest into the 21st century. And I think it is right to say that the pandemic has now started and forced us to consider the second revolution in education. The first one being the democratization of education when it became available to everyone, having been designed as an education for an elite only. And this will be the second revolution. And I do mean a revolution because that is what the pandemic has now rung in. I think we need to look at everything we do in education rather than trying to tinker with it. Because the expectations of our students, the expectations of our parents, and also the expectations of the world and the community of employers has now changed, because we were forced to move into the digital space with literally no notice. And whether we want it or not, whether we are scared of it or not, we will have to deal with it. History has kind of overtaken us now. We have spent in the UK and in Europe, elsewhere, in America, in Australia, we spend a long time in education research, tinkering, trying to make things better, looking at providing better for the most able, providing better for the least able, making sure we equalize things, making sure we increase opportunities, focusing on skills. All of these things were tinkering. What the pandemic has now taught us is we need to include the digital space as an alternative space and as a space in which we can work alongside the physical space. It will have increased expectations of parents and of students. So I can predict, and I'm absolutely certain of that, in a very short period of time, in about when things have calmed down, in a year or so time, we will get the first requests in school. Oh, we're leaving the school, we're moving to a different country. Can we continue our education digitally? We will get people asking from all over the world. They read on the site about our schools, wherever we may be. They have found one particular thing that we specialize in, and they will ask, can we access this digitally? Because it's become a normality. And you're right. Yes, it fills us with nervousness. It fills us with nervousness because what also the pandemic has shown us, that as far as well-being is concerned, and Sam alluded to that, we were surprised to what extent well-being of students and staff and leaders has been affected by the drastic change that the pandemic brought about. But let's not forget, it has not only been adversely affected because we went online, or we all of a sudden had to learn and to teach in a different environment, doing things differently. It also had a negative impact or an adverse impact on well-being because the pandemic, because relatives might have fallen ill or might have died. This will also have exacerbated well-being, as well as the curtailment of liberties, of traveling, of doing the things we normally do, going to concerts and all these kind of things. So I think this digital space that we have now entered in earnest and have proven to the world that we can use as educators and as learners successfully will be there to stay. Sam, do please add on if you want to.
Yeah, there's just one section that I wanted to kind of pick out of there, and it's quite an interesting kind of discussion point where it looks at the unmanageable failures and started to think about the physical and social systems kind of underpin survival. It kind of rung out to me, and I think what's very important to remember, especially all of us are pioneering new learning technology or kind of learning experiences during this time. And I think what is going to be very important to remember here is that things will happen and there will be unmanageable failures. There will be problems that you will encounter. And I think the most important thing is to make sure, especially when using technology, that your policies are protecting your students and staff while using them. So when these failures do happen, you have kind of a safety net to then protect you. But I don't think that we should be kind of trying to be in a position where it should always work and we should always focus on just kind of that positive impact all the time. We need to learn from those failures as much as we possibly can, because realistically, that's how we move forward. That's how we make iterations. That's how we can progress. It's by learning from those mistakes. I think that's everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing the insights. I am sure everybody is delighted to have you, and the insights are going to be helpful on a longer run. Thank you so much once again for being with us.